Let's do it. It's go time.
Welcome to Go Time, your source for wide-ranging discussions from all around the Go community. Find us on the web at gotime.fm, on the Fediverse at GoTime, at changelog.social, and on X at GoTimeFM. Thanks to our partners at Fly.io, the home of changelog.com. Launch your app as close to your users as possible. Find out how at Fly.io. Okay, here we go.
If you're anything like me, friends, then you are the kind of person that puts things off until you have to do it, until you're ready to do it, or something makes you need to do it right now. It's normal, okay? It's called procrastination, or it's called being prepared, whatever you want to call it. It's normal to put things off until you have to do it. Seeing the dentist, going to the doctor, that never-ending chore list. And while most of the time it works out just fine, the one thing in life that you really cannot afford to wait on is setting up term coverage life insurance. You've probably seen life insurance commercials on TV and thought, yeah, I'll look into that later. No, later doesn't come. This really isn't something you can wait on. Choose life insurance through Ladder today. Here's what we love about Ladder and why we allow them as a sponsor. They are 100% digital. No doctors, no needles, no paperwork when you apply for $3 million in coverage or less. Just answer a few questions about your health in an application. Ladder's customers rate them 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot, and they made Forbes' Best Life Insurance 2021 list. You just need a few minutes and a phone or laptop to apply. Ladder's smart algorithm works in real time, so you'll find out if you're instantly approved. No hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. Get a full refund if you change your mind in the first 30 days. Ladder policies are issued by insurers with long, proven histories of paying claims. They're rated A and A+ by AM Best. Finally, since life insurance costs more as you age, now's the time to cross it off your list. So go to ladderlife.com/changelog right now to see if you're instantly approved. That's LADDER life.com/changelog.
Hello and welcome to Go Time. Today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Samantha Coyle, who's going to be talking about her newly published textbook called Go Programming for Beginner to Professional. Learn everything you need to build modern software using Go. This book serves as a go-to guide to master Go for real-world software dev success, covering fundamentals to advanced topics. And I'm told this is the first time she's going to be talking about her book. So we have the Go Time exclusive. So very excited about that. To introduce Sam, for those of you who may not know her, and if you don't, you absolutely should, because she is a brilliant human being and software engineer. She is a software engineer at Diagrid, specializing in Go for cloud native developer tooling, abstracting away application development challenges. She is very committed to open source. She contributes to a number of projects like Dapper, Test Containers, AI Connect for scientific data, and many other projects. She has a rich history in retail computer vision solutions and successfully stabilizing industrial edge use cases with testing and diverse deployments with biopharma data pipelines. Her expertise extends to many different areas. She's CKAD certified, and she's now published this wonderful textbook. So she is a published author at this point, which we're going to be hearing more about in this episode. And Samantha is part of a Gopher family. She goes to GopherCon and the whole family is there. She has her brother, and then she has her identical twin sister, Cassie. She's also a seasoned speaker, so she's talked at GopherCon many times, various other conferences. And the main thing that I really love about Sam is she's super passionate about empowering early career and diverse professionals, and she actually does it. She goes out into the world, she empowers people, she takes her time to make sure newbies in the community are heard, are supported. And I feel like this book is just another step in her empowering that new generation and old generation of Gophers to be their best Gopher. So hello, Samantha. How are you?
Hi.
I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. It's my second Go Time podcast, so I'm like, yay. And then also to be like sharing on my book, I'm like, even more, yay. Yeah, I'm really, really proud of it and super excited to be here and share this with everyone. Yeah, it's my first time sharing it out. So like nervous and excited and overwhelmed with like happiness. It's like a nice mix of emotions. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, very excited to dive in. So let's start with just like an intro to you, like how this even like came to be. Like how did this book idea, this writing a book concept come into your life?
Yeah, so how did this door open for me? That's like a really good question because I don't know. I wouldn't have ever imagined this until like recently, right? And so, you know, in recent years, like I've developed a love for conferences and GopherCon's like very high on my list. And I think it was 2022, I presented main stage GopherCon on, I think it was called A Journey Through Integration Testing with Go and what can go wrong. And it was a hit, and I really enjoyed sharing those learnings. And somehow Packet Publishing found out about me, and they reached out and they said, hey, we're looking for authors. Would you be interested? And I said, yes. Because at the time, you know, I had recently like moved home and I was kind of being a bit more of a hermit due to some like family stuff going on. And so I wasn't going out, I wasn't dating, I wasn't doing a whole lot besides like pursuing like my technical growth and professional self. And so when this door opened, I just kind of like dove right in and I said yes. And I was looking back through my emails and when I like signed the author contract, and it was, I believe, in like January 2023 that I signed up for it. So it's been about a year and 2-3 months in the making to get to this point where we have like a published book, like physical copy that I can feel with my hands and look through.
It's very excited. I'm ready to get my my signed copy. But before we dive a little bit deeper into the book and the specifics, I really want to ask a little bit more about kind of your background, your expertise, because I feel like there are two maybe potential Gopher listeners here, people who maybe have written books before and are looking to kind of hear from a fellow author. Secondarily, which is really what this question is for, is people who, you know, are in the Go community or in other tech communities and maybe have thought about writing a book, but maybe the thing that's stopping them is like, oh, like, do I have enough years experience? Do I need to have written before? Do I need to have done talks? So I think it'd be really interesting to hear a little bit about like your background, your expertise, and maybe a little bit about when you felt you were ready, or did you even think you were ready and you were like, oh, I might as well give it a go?
Okay. So some background context on me. You know, I'm a software engineer at Diagrid. I've been at Diagrid for about a year now, where we're working on developer tooling to help developers run high-scale, modern web applications. And yeah, I've gotten a lot of really great experience, like in my current role right now, especially like working with some really great open source technologies like Dapper and test containers and a few others, right? And really grown a lot in this role in particular. But I do have some really great and fun experiences with Go in my past before where I'm at now, which is like a 30-person startup that I work at with my sister, which is really fun and cool. So it's like half of the children in my family are at a 30-person startup. Pretty unique and fun. So there's that. And everything that I do in my day-to-day where I'm at now is with Go, some open source, which is really cool. And I'm like working on some really key features of our product that will be launching into public preview here soon. So I'm like really excited about that. And yeah, so some of my focus areas right now are like our managed services when it comes to State Store and PubSub. So I'm excited to keep sharing my knowledge and learnings in the future on that as well, as it pertains to Go and all of these really exciting distributed system concepts. My past, specifically, I've done a lot of cool things from big companies like Intel to other small startups where I was like the 13th or 14th hire, I think. And I've done a variety of tasks. You mentioned that I've done some computer vision stuff in the past. So at Intel, I was in the Internet of Things group, and that became the Health and Life Sciences group. So it kind of like lends towards what the projects were like designed for. So like a smart city solution working to improve city safety, leveraging Go. And so I did some really cool stuff on that project, as well as a project that was recently open sourced, that AI Connect project you mentioned earlier. And that one was for healthcare cellular images and running those images through a pipeline processing solution. Ultimately, so you could get like diagnosis and treatment potentially based on the results. So like really inspiring project and really fun to work with. And I specifically helped with like stabilizing the deployment because we were, at the edge, a diverse deployment scenario. So considerations on that front, leveraging Go. Also some interesting ones like internationalization with Go. So there's like a Go I-18N package that was fun to work with, and tracing and monitoring there. So fun stuff at Intel, and also a startup that I worked at before where, that was like a lot of refactoring and updating code to make it like nice and clean and enable us to gain insights into our solution. And how does this look like deploying our Go microservices to cyber physical test beds? And so I very much lean towards stability and good practices and testing. And so I am hoping that's conveyed in the book. And definitely a lot of additions and stuff were like containing my background and like things that I think Go developers should learn as they're, working towards proficiency in Go and becoming successful with the language. So hopefully that translates well. So that's like my context and like my background. So I got to a point where when Packet reached out, it's like, yeah, like what makes you qualified to be an author? And I don't think there's like a clear-cut answer to that, Angelica. I don't know if you have the answer, but I don't.
No, I definitely do not have the answer.
Yeah, so you asked me like, how did you know? And it's kind of down to like intuition, gut feeling. I felt as though I knew enough. I've been in the industry long enough, and I have a lot of opinions that I wanted to share out with beginner gophers and people who want to become successful in real world Go development. And so I loved sprinkling some of those juicy bits throughout the book.
No, that completely makes sense. And you kind of mentioned hoping to have the book help new gophers, but is there any like pre-knowledge needed for someone to really get the most out of the book? I.e., what's the leveling in terms of coming to the book, reading it and getting the most out of it? Is it like a baseline understanding of computer science is required, prior language, like understanding, Go specific understanding? Would really like to understand like people who are maybe thinking, is this book right for me? What kind of readers?
Yeah, so for that, there's like no knowledge of Go required. I would say there's definitely like you would want to at least understand some aspects of computer science to know like, I have data and I need to do stuff with this data and I need control flow. So if you have like a basic, very, very basic understanding of computer science, then this is a great resource. If you're wanting to learn Go, if you're a newcomer to the language, then this is also a really great resource, as well as for, industry professionals who are like, Go sounds really cool and has a great community and a lot of great aspects to the language. Like I'm intrigued. Then it's a great resource. It goes all the way from foundational knowledge, like the basics, to advanced topics. And it has a lot of exercises interweaved throughout where, I'm like, here's a concept. Let's look at what this looks like in code that you walk through step by step. And then what does that look like to expand upon through activities? So totally tailored towards newcomers. And I really think that's like, it hits home for me because it's like, I want to continue sharing my technical expertise with people and bring others up and uplift them with me. And so, yeah, I feel like this was just somehow naturally the next progression in my journey on that.
For sure. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about like the specifics of what you cover in the book. I'm wondering, like, what are you hoping readers will get out of it when they've read this book? What is the like takeaways or takeaway that you want them to have having gone through the book?
So like very high level summary of like a key takeaway is like, I want people to feel confident in their Go abilities to write real world Go applications. That's like a key takeaway, no matter their background, right? So that's like a key takeaway. And that's grounded in all of the 21 chapters in my book. And I was actually looking because I couldn't remember how many pages there were, but there's 650 pages of like goodness, I think, in here, or hopefully, right? And hopefully readers agree. But it totally goes through the flow of, I want to learn Go. What does this mean? Let's start with the basics. And as I mentioned earlier, it's like, okay, well, the basics are, I have data. What do I do with this data, and how does this look like working with it in code? How can I define variables and assign values to that? How can I, now that I have data, work with the control flow of that data through my program? You know, like for loops, if conditional, switch statements. I mean, I don't know exactly all of the chapters like as they progress, but it's very much basics like that. I have data. What do I do with it? To, you know, I'm working on building out a bigger program, maybe. I'm developing Go modules and packages. How do I consume those and write well-written code that others can read and understand and iterate on? And so that's where we talk about functions and designing good quality code and templating things out in modules and packages, as I mentioned, and even interfaces and generics. So those were added as well. So, right, getting at how can we, now that we're writing good quality code, look at reducing our footprint, writing clean code, and thinking about, hey, I have some duplication here, like let's clean it up. So let me see, I should probably like refer to this to see what are some of the next things. Oh my goodness. Well, so it's like you keep iterating. It's like, then we have like maybe a project that we're working on. And it's like, okay, maybe if I'm trying to connect to a database or connect to other services and I have an error, how do I handle that? Should I panic? Should I not? How do I define an error? So then we're starting, you know, to think about how can I be mindful of writing quality software for the real world. And I can keep going. It's like from here, we keep iterating on the idea of error handling. Oh, and talking about types, right? Debugging, right? Writing applications. If you have an issue, it's like, what are some tactics in Go you can leverage to debug? What are some information pieces that you should add in like debug logs and different helpful methods for that? So then we talk about some advanced topics like time, command line utilities. I feel like CLIs are like very, very popular with Go. And there's been some really great features coming out with respect to TUIs. Have you ever heard of a TUI?
No, I've not. Can you please tell me? Tell me more.
Well, I guess I shouldn't say TUI. It's kind of like I'm starting with an acronym. And it's not always the greatest to start with an acronym, but it's a terminal UI. And so I also thought like, okay, well, what are some relevant pieces that I should include in like these chapters as we're progressing? And a terminal UI is like really nifty, and you can add like basically what it is, terminal UI. So I touch on that in the code, and it's actually something like we've worked on at my company. So like really relevant stuff as we're going through the book. File systems, interacting with, and I mentioned databases. I mean, honestly, a lot of this is practical to the stuff that I do daily. Like, as I mentioned, I'm focused on our managed state store. And so what does it look like to create databases and tables and writing queries and interacting with those external resources? All very relevant stuff touched on in, well, web servers and clients and concurrency testing. I don't know. There's a lot of good stuff in here, and you keep iterating and it keeps getting to more advanced topics and things that are like real world relevant, very much like what a professional gopher would do.
For sure. And is it written in a way that you would want someone to start at the beginning and kind of in the way you described it, kind of go along Or is it something where if I, for example, I'm like, oh, I'm really struggling with, I don't know, concurrency today. Let me look and see where the concurrency chapter is. Like, is it both a read cover to cover, but also like a dip in for specific instances where you're interested to try and like learn more?
100%. So that's one of the great things about this book is it's very much a comprehensive, like cover to cover. You can read it, and I feel like you'll feel very confident in your capabilities as a gopher. And it is also something that, yeah, if you're like struggling with concurrency and you want to gain some of the insights on, well, what are some of the like latest additions to the language? How can I gain insights on, concurrency? And it's comprehensive from cover to cover, I would say, to becoming more of a professional gopher. But it's also comprehensive, I would say, with regard to chapter content. So say we're talking about the concurrency chapter. It's like, okay, well, what is a Go routine? How do I communicate between Go routines? How do I synchronize data access and make sure I'm being mindful of race conditions? And what's the race flag that I can use to check if I'm being unsafe? Stuff like that. So it very much is comprehensive also in terms of each chapter with examples. And obviously it's kind of hard, right? Because my book is 650 pages. It's a lot. And I don't want to go overboard. It's like I actually had to cut chapters and chapter sections. So it's also kind of like from an author perspective, you have to be mindful of like, what are some of the latest changes to the language that I should include in this book? And, there were changes that were like made for this book specifically because of that. But then also I think it's like, what are things that are changing in relevancy or, based on my own experience, what are things that I think are missing? So there were tweaks based on that as well.
So it feels like there's a lot of content in the book, but what is your favorite part of the book? If you had to pick one or two, I'll give you two.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the content and picking a favorite section, I mean, there's parts that I like, right? Like some of the examples I had a lot of fun with, like I'd put my name and be like, hello, Sam, or I'd throw some really fun examples in there, like what is the largest stocked item on a farm and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fun all throughout. Yeah. But then it's like my favorite chapter, I'd have to say, is I think it actually might be the last chapter. It's called Go in the Cloud. And I think it's very, very relevant. And I think it's one of those chapters that when you think about writing real world software and running Go code wherever, like in production or wherever, like you want monitoring insights, you want to understand what's going on with your application, and you want to make sure that it's well written, right? And so this last chapter of Go in the Cloud, it touches on, well, how can I containerize my application? So it's taking you also up to speed, I think, just in general for a software engineer. Like, how do I containerize my code? What does that look like? How can I instrument my application using some really awesome open source tools out there that really enable you to gain insights into your running application? And so it's like, okay, well, what are the different aspects that Prometheus gives me for monitoring? And that's like histograms, gauges, counters that you can add. And so I have like an example in the code where every time you hit an endpoint, it adds like a counter, and it's like counter incremented. It's like giving you that foundational knowledge to gain insights in your application. And I touch on things like tracing and running your application with an orchestrator like Kubernetes. So it's like very, very relevant stuff. And I think I had the most fun writing that chapter. So that's favorite chapter. I have another favorite part of the book, and this is like much more of a personal note. So I don't know. I guess I put some of my personal business out there, but one of the things that I really wanted to do with my book was take advantage of a dedication section. And I don't know, I feel like not a lot of people like write a textbook. And I was really proud of writing a technical textbook. And so I dedicated this to my mom. So I don't know. I touch on that in the dedication, and like she's a big part of why I am the way I am today and who I am today, and who instilled like a lot of hard work. I mean, it's your typical, like you're influenced so heavily by your parents, but I got to dedicate this to my mom. So yeah, really nice.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And such a special thing to be able to do, for sure.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I was like really nervous for like getting that part right. And it's like, that was one paragraph of a 650-page book. So, yeah.
Yeah, but understandable, because, you know, that is the personal and the rest is more on the technical side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was my special part of this book.
No, for sure. That's all. I'm excited to read it.
What's up, Go Time? Adam here in the breaks, talking to Sagar Bachu, co-founder and CEO of Speakeasy. Speakeasy is the complete platform for great API developer experience. Generate SDKs in TypeScript, Python, Go, Java, C#, and PHP. You know what, Sagar, imagine I have some listeners who write Go, because, you know, they're listening to Go Time. And they say, I maintain our SDK and I don't mind doing it, but I realize there are ways to generate our SDKs using the Open API specification. Now, give me an exact workflow end to end from curious to leveraging Speakeasy to generate and maintain SDKs for an API written in Go.
Let's take the case of you're building an API from scratch today. If you're building an API in Go, you're probably going to start with one of the common frameworks to build a Go API. I would highly encourage looking at frameworks like Goa and Shuma, which actually give you a lot of scaffolding out of the box to not just write your API, but also to make sure that you get an open API spec generated off of each build of your API. That is like a really great foundational building block to invest in as a company, because that means all future development of the API is guaranteed to be described and documented out of the box. Once you do that, it's, I think, a good idea to have some basic concepts of ownership built in. So if you have multiple services or microservices, make sure your services are annotated by teams that own it, and then also give your resources simple names that get reflected in the Open API spec. Once you do that, the spec is going to get created every time you build your API. So through CI/CD, your spec will get generated every time you build and host the API. Make sure that spec gets pushed to a change management solution. I think that's where Speakeasy can come in. You actually push the spec to us on every build, and we'll create a version snapshot of it. So you have it we give you prominence of it, so you have it for future builds and future work that you want to do on it. Once that happens, you can attempt to generate an SDK, and we'll hook directly into your CI/CD and grab the latest version of the spec. Every time that happens, we'll compare the spec to a previous version, tell you if there's any breaking changes, and send you a pull request on any repo to generate that new code. Once you get to that first version of the SDK, that's where you really want to do some human-in-the-loop investment and take a look at, does the SDK suit your needs? Is it ergonomic in the way you think it should be? And then also is it documented? Is it described well? If there are gaps in that documentation, you can go back and add that in your code base. But if this is not a new API and this is a legacy API, you can use tools like overlays to actually add in that documentation without altering the original spec itself or altering the source code. So you do some investment there to make sure that the SDK output is ergonomic, well described and documented. And once that happens, you kind of set us on autopilot. So every time your spec changes, Speakeasy will send you new pull requests. And once you merge a pull request, it gets published and released on GitHub. Thank God Go doesn't have a separate package manager. It's all GitHub. So the moment the Git repo is updated, you get a brand new SDK version released to your customers. That's the complete workflow, all the way from your API server to your CI/CD to actually having generated and hosted SDK.
So take me in as close as you can. Give me an ant's eyes view. Why is this beneficial for a team?
I think it's really beneficial when you start thinking about growth and scaling the company. The moment you have more than one developer touching an API, let's say you have 2 and 3 developers touching and iterating on an API, you want all those changes to be captured and documented somewhere so that someone else, not necessarily the same developer, can decide whether that API needs to get distributed to outside the company. Doing that upfront investment means every API change is described and documented, and every N+1 developer that comes on the team is also going to onboard that much faster, right? Because everything, like you're not going to need to know about how every service is constructed. You're just going to be able to look at the open API spec and say, we have 3 APIs today. 2 of them are generally available, one's in beta, and then one's on V1 and one's on V2, right? That's like you at the most granular level, like that upfront documentation means you're going to be able to move a lot faster on other development going forward. So I would say like that's if I had to say one huge benefit of that is doing that upfront investment means every developer building an API going forward is not going to have to like learn all the context of every API. It's just going to be there described in a simple single document.
Okay, go to speakeasyapi.dev. You get your first SDK generator for free. Once again, speakeasyapi.dev, and tell them GoTime sent you.
So one question, turning back to the technical, that I had as I was thinking through the textbook, just the concept of writing a technical textbook in general is, like with many languages, but especially with Go, it's open source. We're continually seeing upgrades, improvements. We have a whole team at Google who's working on it, as well as external maintainers and contributors. How do you make sure, / how did you think about keeping the content relevant so that it wasn't going to be kind of out of date within a month, 2 months, a year, etc., given the continual changes that we're seeing in the Go language?
Right. Yeah. That's a really great question. And I think a consideration anyone should have when putting any content out there, be it a blog or a book, and something that not only me as like a personal published author, which is like still fun to say and I still get goosebumps, but it's like something that even
as you should.
Thanks. But it's like even something that the Go team has to keep in mind too, right? Like the tour of Go and Go by example, like they have to keep that up to date too. So I think when it comes to making sure you keep up to date with the language, it's like everyone has to do it. It's like a natural progression, which is really nice. But then, it's hard of like, how do I make sure what I'm putting out there is relevant, is current, and will stay that way for like X amount of time? And I don't know how you even define X amount of time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you were writing for what, 1.5 years, I think I remember right. And there have been a number of changes even in that time. So, I mean, did you you alluded to this, but did you kind of have to like re-edit sections that then changed due to new releases?
In terms of that question, I think 122, Go version 122 came out near the end of me updating this. And I left it as 121 because, it's kind of like when you're going through writing a textbook, and in this case, it's actually a second edition. So it is something that I did have to go through each chapter and say, what needs to be added, what needs to be removed, like what is now relevant. And I mean, there's different cases of that throughout the book, such as new chapters being added on generics. And then it's like, well, okay, how do I think about what a newcomer would think of this new topic? And it's like generics are going to keep changing as we iterate with new Go versions. So considerations on that front. Even in the concurrency chapter, I added sections on a sync condition. So it's like making sure that like Go routines, if a condition occurs, you can signal that occurrence or a change in shared data. So stuff like that was added, and like you look through, okay, what are some of the changes in the different Go releases? And you're like, okay, this is missing. And there were even some things in the book like go-to statements, which I think go-to statements have been out for quite a while. I mean, it's hard to keep up with like this came out with Go, like whatever version. It's hard, even in my brain, to keep track of it all. But it's like stuff like that that's been existing. I was like, okay, I think go-to statements should be touched on. But then stuff like that, and even in the concurrency section and in some of the other sections, right? It's like, well, even though this is new, use with caution. Like just because we have this shiny new toy doesn't mean we have to use the shiny new toy and like overcomplicate something just to use generics or overcomplicate something to have each function in a file. Like, no, it's like always finding a good balance. So I touch on that all throughout the book, concepts as well.
Got it. And do you prescribe or suggest ways of using some of the concepts that you're outlining, or is it more instructional and these are the many ways you can use it? I ask that just because I know that, talking to a number of gophers on certain technologies or certain packages, etc., people like to use them, even like write their code different ways. So wondering how much you've like prescribed, suggested versus like laying out the different options as someone who, like, I'm sure like you have your own views on like what the right way to do things is or the right way to use certain things are.
Right. So in terms of that question, I would say it's like, for me, it was important to say, this is one way you can do it, but there's like packages out there that will help if you want to do it a different way. So one example of that that comes to mind is like middleware for HTTP servers, right? And so I know there's like the Alice package out there that will help you chain your middleware. So I'm pretty sure I touched on stuff like that, but did show it like manually typed out how you can do it, just so that way, throughout all of the examples, I tried to think about how can this be as clear as possible. And so I think sometimes it's important to not, I guess, use the shiny new toys, and sometimes to like put it down to the basics. So I think I tried to touch on alternative methods and alternative packages and stuff like that. But in some other aspects, it's like for the databases chapter and like writing queries and connecting to a database, I think I used the PQ. I think it's PQ or PG. I don't know. I'd have to relook at it, but I did use one package when now I use another, So it's like that's also another consideration. Like, yes, I prescribed one package, but I think touching on that there are other packages to do the same thing is like really valuable to touch on for readers, because they don't know. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So I think it's like nice to touch on stuff like that. And even something for me, thinking about keeping this relevant and thinking about like, would I do another edition? Maybe I would in the future, like change that package out and use a different one if it's like more relevant and current. So it's like a balance. It's a balance for sure.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about like the process of writing the book. Like, how did you do it? How did you think about it? How did you decide what to change, what to keep? I know you said that this is a second edition, so interested in how, like, did you talk to the author of the first edition? Was there collaboration there? Were you given complete like creative freedom to edit whatever from the first edition made sense? And really just interested on how it came together, both logistically and also just how you mentally got there.
Okay. There's a lot in that question, so I'll start with some and you tell me what I forget. Okay. So in terms of the writing process, I think I kind of went into it with no expectations. It's like, yes, there's like an author contract and you sign it and you kind of know some going in, but I feel like it's very much one of those things like you learn as you go. And I don't think I fully understood everything involved with it going into it, if I'm being honest. One of the first things that will happen is like you have an outline. And if someone does have an idea for a new book, and who knows, I might have an idea for the future, right? Then I would go to them and be like, hey, here's my outline. Here's why I think we need this book, the gaps that it solves, the considerations that were even in mind for this book. in this edition. And so there's an outline with all of the activities and exercises, like hands-on coding stuff, thought through at a high level. And so for me, there was like a pre-existing outline, and I made updates, and I had full creative power as I saw fit within reason, right? Like I couldn't be like, I want to add 20 new chapters on top. That's not how it worked. Because two, I'm like restricted because we want to make sure that readers are engaged and it's not overwhelming. And so there's kind of a sweet spot, and I don't know what the exact sweet spot is when it comes to like page count and all of that, but 650 pages was good with my publisher. So I guess that's like within reason. But yeah, you have an outline, you make changes, or you fill in the outline as you see fit. It's agreed upon. You work on a schedule, and with that schedule, you talk about like, hey, I'm presenting at GopherCon like this month, and I'm going to be on vacation that month. So they kind of know like, okay, Angelica might be busier this month, or, you know, like you keep in mind, like we're also humans and we do stuff outside of work and sleep and eat and all of those other things that come with just being human. So the publishers do understand that, which is really nice. But then they also like to stick to schedule. So one of the things that I learned was it's very hard to keep with schedule, if I'm being honest. It sounds easy and it sounds nice to the publishers to get 15 pages done a day, or, you know, like X amount of work accomplished each day. But some days are hard and I'm tired and I don't want to do the book. And then other days are easy and I like knock out a whole chapter. So there's a bit of fluctuation, I will say. And then, yeah, you write your chapter outlines in Google Docs. So it's kind of, it's hard because it's like, I mean, we code in Terminal or an IDE, and then when it comes to translating that code over into a Google Doc, sometimes it capitalizes things or it adjusts the indentation. So like you have to go through and like fix stylistic things like that, which are honestly like not the funnest, which makes sense.
Weird. I love to correct indentations.
I know. So yeah, that was kind of frustrating if I'm being honest, but like a natural part of it, right? Like we have to put it into Google Docs with our words and the context and the content, and then that goes to a reviewer. So you have multiple technical reviewers usually per textbook. And so shout out to mine. I had two awesome reviewers by the name of Stan Vangelder and Ivan Lemonshev. So I'm sorry if I mispronounce. But yeah, like could not have done it without them, like giving me feedback, right? So it's like write the chapter, get feedback from them, adjust and account for feedback. Maybe it's like make something clear, adjust an example. And all throughout, right, it's kind of like you have an editor who's like, this should be adjusted or this style should be changed. And then you fix all of that and it goes to someone else who will like do a final run through of the Word doc. And then it goes to PDF and you have to review all of the PDFs. And then it goes into, well, honestly, I had to like review all of that, make final tweaks and email them like, PDF page 1 needs this tweaked, you know? So it's like, I'm not perfect. So you go through and like keep iterating and you try to do the best you can. And then it gets printed and you get mailed a copy. And I actually got to send, so I got 2 copies and my boyfriend's dad wanted one, which I thought was really sweet. And so I gave him my second copy because he's like, I'm going to read it. So can I have one? So yeah, then you have like really special moments like that where I'm like, yes, thanks for the support.
That's awesome. So have you read it since you got the final print? Because for me, I'm going to be honest, if I spent all those hours and like sleepless nights editing, I would not know whether I wanted to read it or not, just in case there was some issue, some grammatical error or something.
Mm-hmm. So honestly, like I still go back and forth. Like I will read it eventually and like read it through end to end because I think it's important, like even for me, like writing it to then read it so I can see, okay, like maybe I would have changed this. And I think that's important to do for the next edition, right? In X amount of time, when I think there should be enough changes to like mean that we should have another edition to keep it relevant.
So have not read yet, but will read at some point.
Yes. Yes.
So kind of as you're thinking about like the book, it's now in the real world. Like what kind of feedback, what kind of input have you got more broadly? I know it's just come out from the community, but I'm just interested to hear, like, is it what you expected? Is it kind of early days and you're kind of waiting for feedback?
So we're still early days. If I'm being honest, I think I waited like a whole month before I publicized, like, I wrote a book. I don't know why. It took me a month to be like, okay, like, I need to share this. And I think part of that was like, I was tired and overwhelmed and, more stuff personally going on when I finished this book. Like I just moved and bought a house. So there was a lot going on for me and I was just very, very overwhelmed, if I'm being honest. So I'm at the point where I feel like things have like simmered a little bit and I'm like ready for the world and ready for the feedback. And so I'm like actively looking at like, okay, well, I need to get this out there and share it with people so they know about it. And so far I've gotten some really great reviews on Amazon, which is really excited. I never really thought about it, but I got to create an Amazon author page with like a bio and everything. So it's like really official and it like sunk in more because like you said, it was definitely like long days where, we sit at a desk or we can stand and work staring at a screen all day. And so then after work, I would like do the same, working on the book. So it was a lot. And I feel really proud of accomplishing this and like putting in the hard work because I think like hard work does pay off. And I was really quiet the whole time working on this. Like, I don't really think many people knew throughout, but I think it's one of those moments where it's like, you lay low, like work hard and do good work. And then when you're ready, you share it with the world. And I feel like I'm at that point where I'm ready and I'm sharing it with the world. And I'm getting awesome feedback that's really encouraging. And I really appreciate all of it. And then I'm also getting feedback where people are like, hey, this is lowercase when it should be uppercased. And I don't know. It's like, I still need to like look at some of the other feedback I've received, making sure I'm like giving attention to like what readers are thinking and thinking about, okay, well, how can I make this better, say for the future? So, there are little things like that have come up, but so far so good. And I'm really excited and hoping that people continue to like it and enjoy reading it and like gain awareness on it. Because I think that's one of the other things. It's like, you don't know what you don't know, and people might not even know this book exists. So if it's a tool that could be useful and people like reading, then, well, hopefully they can find out about it.
Well, they're going to know about it now. They're going to know about it now on this episode. So
Yeah.
And I actually just I did a little skim of the Amazon reviews, and two things popped out to me. One, 5-star reviews all around. And two, I loved the fact that I saw your wonderful twin sister, Cassie, wrote a lovely little review as well. I thought that was lovely.
Yeah, she was like, I'm going to get it and support you, and I'll leave you some feedback. So I'm like, thank you.
Very thoughtful feedback. I love it. If it was my sister, I probably would have just been like, well done.
Yeah.
Where she wrote a very long, wonderful review. Okay, awesome. So you have this book out there. You're kind of starting to put it out there in the world, get some feedback. You mentioned, thinking through 3rd edition, next steps. So in your mind, like, what is next in terms of both like the book, thinking through future writings, further engagement with the community, and also just like for you, like as a gopher who is now a published author in the Go space, like what are you thinking in terms of your technical future and your future as like a technical writer?
Okay. So in terms of the book, it's kind of like what you were saying earlier, like how do you make sure you keep up and keep the relevancy with respect to the language progressing and just I think what it means to be a software in the real world. Like, how do I make sure that the content in this book also hits home there? So I definitely think, in the future there will be a third edition. And now I know what to expect, like 100%. So that's fine. I'm cool doing that in the future. And I don't know when that would be. I suppose, a few more iterations of the language would have to come out. And it's also one of those things that it's like I got to put my touch on this second edition. And I think even in another edition, I can make it that much better or that much more of like my own. So that's also really exciting prospects for me to keep in mind and consider. So yeah, I think there will be another edition in the future, to keep up with the language and keep up with the relevancy of what the book covers. So there's that. And I do think that, I will look at what are other author materials that can come from little old me. So I'll be excited to kind of see, where I'm at even in just 5 years. I do think it would be fun. Yeah, I think it would be fun to do like other authorship stuff. And I have some ideas. I'll keep those on the down low. And in terms of me personally, I'm excited for like a little break from writing. I'm like still working on what are professional avenues to keep growing technically. So I have some of those pinpointed down and some specific to go. So excited to see where it goes and share that with everyone as it comes.
Awesome. So as we kind of conclude chit-chatting about the book, is there anything that you want to highlight, that you want to say, that I want to make sure that there's nothing that you would want to highlight that goes unsaid to do with the book?
I would say that I hope that people really enjoy reading it, and I hope that you can see my personal marks on it and that it can make people successful gophers and to where they can feel successful writing real world Go programming or real world Go code. So I would say that about the book specifically. And overall, I would say you never know what doors will open. And I think that's a big thing here is like I'm always constantly thinking about how can I keep growing and be grateful for where I'm at and grateful for like the things that are ahead of me that I can keep growing into. And this book happened to just come out of nowhere because I presented at GopherCon. This door opened. So it's like we should always like see what's behind each door, and you never know what other doors will be opened up because of that.
So I have a final question, which is not necessarily to do with the book, but I think it's one that I personally have and I think would be interesting to hear you speak a little bit on, is like, as someone who, and I know you're going to like be like, oh no, as someone who is like who is now, I think, a very prominent female figure in the Go community, and who, you've talked many times at GopherCon, as we've said, you contribute a lot to like meetups, the community more broadly, and now you're a published author and you've been on Go Time 2 times and hopefully more. What advice, guidance, what kind of knowledge would you give to other female gophers specifically in the community who maybe are struggling, are feeling that like very deep-rooted imposter syndrome around like, oh, am I good enough? Like, how do I like progress? How do I get better at advocating for my skills and making sure that I'm not being pigeonholed into like, oh, you're kind of technical, but not really.
Yeah.
And really feeling confidence in being like, no, I am a technical woman in this field and I'm amazing, like you are.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think it's something that like everyone secretly struggles with. And I don't know if everyone like shares that, but like even for me before this, I mean, I literally wrote a textbook and I'm like nervous for like a podcast. I think it's like it's natural to have those considerations. And I think for me, I've always wanted to, be a role model. And so I like to volunteer at my old university and abroad on like different things and give my time towards things that will like inspire others and make them see the art of the possible. Because I think that's the thing. It's like some people don't know what's possible unless they see it for themselves. And so I'm like hoping that I can continue to be a role model on that front. And that's why I do help to run the Women Who Go meetups. And I work with awesome people like you to do the same at like GopherCon and other events specific to the Go community, but also, you know, in the more broader software engineering field. If I think about some of my idols, a lot of them are men, and that's totally fine. But I also think in my future, I would want someone to be like, wow, if Sam can do it, I can too. And it's like, well, then how can I bring others up with me? And so things like writing a book and sharing your expertise, it's like really empowering, and it makes me feel good to like share that back. But then also, I think, yeah, just people seeing like, if she can do it, I can too.
Awesome. Well, that concludes this portion of the episode, chit-chatting about your awesome book. Just to finish out and make sure that everyone knows, the book is on Amazon. That is where you can find it. Is there any other places that you would recommend people go, or is Amazon the kind of go-to place?
I think it's the go-to place, and I think there's the Kindle version and the physical copy, which I would be more than willing to sign.
You better. Are you going to be at GopherCon this year?
Yes.
Or is that TBD?
I will be there. I will be super excited to see everyone there this year.
Awesome. So that means that you have a couple weeks. I think it's like 5 weeks, I want to say, till GopherCon, to buy the book and then bring it and get Sam to sign it. And I will be doing that, and I will expect a very long message, please.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. So pick up the book, check it out, leave all those wonderful Amazon reviews. If you don't like the book, then I don't know what to say to you, because it's great. And if you feel the need to write a review, please add 5 stars. Awesome. We are going to now transition into my favorite part of the episode, even though this was very fun, unpopular opinions.
Unpopular opinion. I actually think you should probably leave. Unpopular opinion.
So, Sam, what is your unpopular opinion?
So I always like to make these like light, and also like I tend to go more good with my like unpopular opinions. But mine is that toilet paper should always roll over, not under. I'm a very like, I don't know, I think that could be unpopular, but I'm like firm believer that like it should always roll over.
So what you mean is, just so we're clear, the like toilet paper should lie like on top of the roll.
Yeah.
And be pulled from the top, not the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
I think it's
is there science behind this, or is it just a preference? Because I like it being rolling over the top. I like specifically because you can like fold it into like a little triangle and like make it look real neat, like in a hotel.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know whether you have a more scientific reasoning.
I think so. I mean, some people like don't care, right? And then some people are like firm believers, like it should go under. For me, it's like, I think there was some post about it where the manufacturer images for how to get toilet paper shows it rolling over. So to me, it is the more correct way of retrieving your toilet paper.
I think I'm actually quite intrigued by that one, because I feel like it's non-controversial, but it's intriguing in that I am wondering how many people will disagree and agree, or will like question, do I agree or disagree? I've never really thought about this before.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a classic one, kind of like the should pineapple be on pizza? Yes or no? Like ultimately it boils down to personal preference, but some people have very strong opinions on
Well, I think pineapple on pizza is a controversy. I do not think that is a personal preference. I think that's you have taste buds or you don't.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it's kind of like a classic one where toilet paper is like a little different.
Fair enough. Okay, well, we'll see what the Gopher community says about your toilet paper preferences. I think we should just call it that in the tweet. Sam Coyle's toilet paper preferences.
Not a bad headline.
And then we'll link up. Okay. Okay. So that is your unpopular opinion. Do you have any other unpopular opinions, or that's the main one?
That was my...
You don't have to.
Yeah, I stick with my safe ones until I get more creative.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that might prompt you to have an unpopular opinion.
Oh.
What was your least favorite part of the book? What is the chapter that if people don't have time, they can skip?
Least favorite? I don't think I have like a... I mean, I have like a chapter that was the most fun for me to write, but I don't know if I had one that's like, I didn't like writing this. I don't think I have a least favorite chapter because I think they're all like good in terms of what I want people to get out of the book. I don't know if I can say that. I
guess maybe most challenging to write then. We'll change it. Like the chapter that you had to revise and like spend the most time on because it was the most challenging in your mind to get right.
I would say maybe the generics one or the concurrency one. I would say that from the perspective of both had one I totally added, right? And the other had a bunch of updates. So I think it's like finding a sweet spot of not writing too much where the chapter's like really, really, really long, but also covering all of the things that I thought should be covered. I think finding that balance was really tough for me. And then making it to where it was easy to digest.
That makes sense. That brings us to the conclusion of our episode together, regrettably. But please come back on Go Time for version 3 in a year or two, given the pace of the pace of Go changing. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and you enjoy the restful period of not writing before you start writing again.
Thank you. Lovely chat with you as always, Angelica. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
That is Go Time for this week. Thanks for listening along. Subscribe now if you haven't already. Head to gotime.fm for all the ways, or simply search for Go Time wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find us. Hey, do you receive our changelog newsletter each Monday? If not, let's fix that bug. One reader calls it so good, he considers it a competitive advantage. Sign up for $0 at changelog.com/news. Thanks once again to our partners at Fly.io, to our mysterious beat freak, Breakmaster Cylinder, and to our friends at Sentry. We love Sentry, you might too. Use code CHANGELOG when you're signing up for a team plan and save $100. Why not, right? That is all for now, but we'll talk to you again next time on Go Time.